Hello and welcome to Business Daily on your channel of choice, Trust TV. It's good to have you join us on the program today. Remember, on this program, we are set to bring you up to speed with business updates in the world of business, finance, economy. We'll be bringing you news making the headline in these trades, talking about the trades of business, finance, economy, capital markets, investment, and so much more. I am your host, Christiana Amodu Otinya. Always a pleasure to have you join us on the program. On today's edition of the program, we'll be x-raying issues that have come up from the oil and gas sector. News recently filtered in on the supposed acquisition of ExxonMobil by Seplat, and we have also seen the President Muhammadu Buhari, who doubles as the Minister of Petroleum, approve the deal, but the approval was rescinded. Now, we'll be looking at the twists and turns on these issues and how the experts will view it from their prism. I'll be joined in the course of the program by Olabode Showomi. He is an energy sector expert and someone that watches the industry. So he will be giving his own perspective on this issue. But before we continue, I'll hold my fire here and take a short break. When we return, the program will continue. Please stay. Welcome back and thank you for still staying there with us on the program. It's time for me to introduce my guest for today. Like I stated earlier, we'll be looking at the dynamics around the acquisition deal between ExxonMobil and Seplat. We've seen a lot of mixed reactions have trailed that deal. I'm be joined in the studio now by Olabode Showomi. He is an energy sector expert and also a consultant in the oil and gas sector. Welcome to the program, Mr. Bode.
Thank you.
But it's always a pleasure to have you on the program to dissect these issues for us. But before we delve into the issues, talking about the issues on the deal or the supposed acquisition, let's take a look at some of the facts that have come up from since we saw the news come out about the acquisition deal, whether there was an acquisition, whether there was none. So now a consortium of local and offshore lenders together with the commodity trading firms is expected to finance the transaction. Seplat, listed in Lagos as it is in London, will be mandated to reapply for admission to the official list of the London Stock Exchange when the transaction is consummated because of the nature of the deal as a reverse takeover. Now, Seplat will pay $128 million according to the terms, which will be paid back to the company should the contract be terminated by Seplat in certain circumstances. The deal will boost Seplat's production to 146,000 barrels of oil, equivalent to a day from 51,000. It also includes significant undeveloped gas potential. Now, Bode, let me bring you in. Now, there's so much about the deal, and since we saw the news come out, we've heard so much being said about how this can be gotten right. I want you to demystify this issue for us, demystify what the whole process is for us.
Okay, thank you, and good morning once again. I think first and fundamentally, the issue is, in a simple case, you have a player who wants to buy a product. I think that needs to be first understood. So it could as well have been Julius Berger wanting to buy a piece of land.
Okay.
So were they to buy a piece of land, they will have to buy from whoever has a right to that land, be it private, be it government. You understand? And whatever they need to do on that land, they'll probably need to get the permission and proper licensing from, say, FCT authority, so that they are not in contravention. I mean, for example, if the land was earmarked as a residential area, they will be in contravention of sorts if they were to build a commercial or a hotel there. So there will be some licenses that need to be approved and all that. And the approving authority, for whatever reason, can decide at some point not to grant that license. So those are the kind of things we see. So those are the kind of things. So to now bring it back into the story, you have a case of a joint venture. Mm-hmm. By the name of a joint venture, it is a venture that is joint. So it's a venture between two people. So that joint venture is between NNPC and ExxonMobil. However, ExxonMobil is the operator of that joint venture. So all joint ventures cannot be driven by all parties. So like they say, there cannot be two captains in one ship.
Sure.
So the captain for that joint venture is ExxonMobil. However, it belongs to both Exxon and NNPC. So what Exxon is trying to do today, or as by that deal, is basically to sell its own shares in that agreement to Seplat. And what NNPC is objecting to is that under the terms of the joint operating agreement, as partners in that deal, they have the right of first refusal.
Okay.
In other words, we are both in business together. We are trying to bring somebody else into the business. How is that person you're bringing going to be agreeable to me? That simply because two of us are in agreement does not mean I'm going to be in agreement with your friend, you know, all those kind of thinking. However, so that is the basis for the controversy. So, but now let's also now look into the issues. First and foremost, it must not be misunderstood. That deal, if it goes through, will be significantly good for the local industry, because that will make Seplat the biggest oil player in Nigeria, and they are going to be in the same category with the likes of Exxon itself, Shell, and all that, which is welcome development for local players. Anyway, it will. However, what the regulator is objecting to is about the process. So in other words, you can do the right thing, but do it the wrong way. So by virtue of the law, the regulator, just like we were talking about approvals coming from FCT for land and all that, is the de facto person that will approve that. But there's a technicality in the law, which is where the issue of whether the president or not comes in, is that that technicality states that if it were not an incorporated joint venture, in other words, if it were not a legal company, then the minister could give approving authority. So the issue in question now is that does the regulator have the latitude to be able to give that approval in this case? That's what I believe to be the issue in question. We have had a lot of experts who've been in groups where these things have been discussed and all that, and there are very strong opinions on both sides. But one thing is very clear. The industry is having a regulator now, pure regulator, and who is trying to exercise his powers.
By the regulator, just to be clear, are you referring to the NUPRC?
NUPRC.
Okay,
that's the Petroleum Upstream Regulatory
Commission.
So upstream basically has to do with anything that has to do with drilling, exploration, production. Midstream and downstream starts from the transportation of that and to the ones that everybody connects with. But in terms of drilling, offshore, all those things, all those, they fall within the upstream commission. So
now, I remember vividly when that news came out, there were so many press releases. So even as a news person, it became a little bit difficult to catch up with the whole process. So if I get what you're saying properly, are you saying the NUPRC is well within its confines of the law to say we want to halt this process for now? Yes, as a regulator. You know, one of the things I've heard people say they've been overreaching and all that, but we need to be realistic. First of all, the job of the regulator in a free market is to ensure that the market, the industry grows and things don't go out of hand. Because left to the players, left to the capitalists, they will suck everybody dry and even society can collapse. So the regulator is like a big brother who is neither supposed to be good or bad, but to ensure that the right things are done. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean the regulator's activities are all right. And that is why there's a provision under administrative law for judicial review where the actions of a regulator can be challenged. So it's the same way that CBN can withdraw the license of a bank because it has the powers of a regulator. And where the CBN is believed to be wrong in that, that can be challenged under the law. So now the actions of the regulator can be challenged, but we must know that certain mergers and acquisitions everywhere in the world, whether it is in Europe, whether it is in US, need regulatory approval before they happen. Those are because they don't want, they don't want a repeat of the antitrust laws, which was the case in the US. Yes. And all that. So the regulator has that, but there is a technicality within the law,
which stipulates that it could happen outside the influence of the regulator. But there are those who say in the spirit of the law, because when a law is passed, there's an ethos behind it. There's what what the drafters are trying to achieve. In that spirit, it does not cover it. So when you have such disagreements, it's best that the court interprets. So that's why I believe that the case in court is not just about Seplat per se or about ExxonMobil, but it's laying a precedence for the industry. Because tomorrow, yes, NNPC is the beneficiary, but NNPC could be on the wrong end of the stick for the purpose of the fact that if NNPC were found to be an incompetent operator, as they have been in a number of wells where, on a number of fields that they have underdeveloped, the regulator now has the right to take those fields from them and auction them. So that way everybody is on their toes. But at the same time, you don't want an unwieldy regulator who is overreaching. So there's a fine balance here. We must know that it is systems that govern society.
Agreed.
We must know that one of the banes of the developing world is lack of proper and strong institutions. As overreaching as Donald Trump was, I'm not an expert in international politics, so I'm not speaking to whether he's right or wrong. But the systems were in place to check him, even though so we need to build strong institutions. The judiciary needs to be strong, the National Assembly needs to be strong, regulators need to be strong and independent. So that way, irrespective of whoever is in place, it is the regulatory institutions that will do their work.
I like the fact that you talked about building strong institutions, because when we have conversations around developing Nigeria, there's always the hammer coming on building strong institutions over building strong men. And I think that's what we are seeing playing out with the whole NUPRC coming in to say this deal cannot go forward. Now, I'm particular about the benefits of this whole discussion, because then again, I tune into my TV as a viewer of Nigerian news or what goes on in the country, and I see, okay, there's acquisition being halted, there's a deal being halted. The part that concerns me largely is how does this benefit the economy? How does it benefit the oil and gas sector? We know that sector has been a mainstay for some time. Vis-a-vis talking about the investment climate, we saw how the PIA came into being, and the PIA coming into being is how can we develop the sector and drive investment in this sector. Now, what are the benefits if this sees the light of day eventually?
If it sees the light of day, the industry size grows. So, for example, we'll talk about the oil industry, or let's say you talk about the sports industry, because there's a business to sports. And we say sports industry in Nigeria is small, it is just about 500 million naira in total, which means that any business you are going to do, the sum of the businesses, whether you're transferring players, whether you're buying equipment, all of those things are going to fall within that amount. So if you come with a business that is 1 billion naira, it's not going to work in that industry. So the industry size needs to grow for bigger businesses to take place. So with Seplat, you are now having a local company, though listed on the London Stock Exchange, who is now going to grow into a big player. If that were to be the case, and depending on the strategic thinking of Seplat, that means they will be in a place to also acquire assets in Angola, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, and thereby be in a place to start to compete with the international oil companies, which is the dream of the Nigerian development ethos. So those are obvious and basic benefits to it. And I don't think anybody is antagonistic to that. It is just an interpretation of how to go about that, because it will be an injustice to the ethos of Nigeria if the intent of anyone is actually to kill the deal. Yes. But however, the right things need to be done the right way. And it is that right way that builds systems, that builds institutions. So we are not just going to kill the systems, kill the institutions, simply because we are trying to do the right thing. Because when you have somebody who is not so righteous in thinking there, I haven't seen that the systems can be shut up and killed, then we will now have people doing the wrong thing. And that is where personalities now become bigger than institutions, which is what we want to move away from.
I also want to ask you now, what does this say about synergy in that system? Because the president gave an approval, the NUPRC raised dust, approval was rescinded. Now, what's the body language that is being sent out?
I think that idea of synergy is overrated. Because first of all, What is
But
important?
if there's no
what is-
synergy, how
what is-
can
let me-
how can
let
it
me,
work?
Let me explain.
Great.
What is important is the rule of law. So as an investor, I am not bothered that certain regulatory or government agencies have differences of opinion. They will always have differences of opinion. What is important is that the right things are done and justice is served. That way I know that if I were to have a different view on something, then look, in international market, despite all the excesses of the US and US companies that are known, people will still prefer to do business with American companies than Chinese or even Russian companies. Because if you were to take a US company to a US court, you are most 90-95% chance of getting justice being served. You cannot say the same of taking a Russian company, of taking a Chinese company to a Chinese court. So rule of law is what is important to the investor. So this idea of synergy and all that is just it's emotional blackmail. What is important is that the presidency, even though the president acts as a minister, you understand, have to be differentiated. So the office of the minister needs to be differentiated from the office of the president. Were it that the thing was being done as the Minister of Petroleum, the news would not have been released by the State House. It would have been released by the press person within the Ministry of Petroleum.
I want to put you in a box or in a corner now. Do you think we have gotten to it's time, looking at the sector, it's time to really take that duty off the shoulders of the president, whereby we have an independent Minister of Petroleum and not president doubling as the Minister of Petroleum?
That's actually the prerogative of the president under the laws. However, if we are to look at what is best practice in terms of how we should have an independent Minister of Petroleum, so that the person will be saddled with the responsibilities and report to the president like every other person. Because the truth be told, one person cannot become a multinational.
Okay.
You can't so there are certain, the president can only do so much.
Okay, let me hold you on that thought. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, the program will continue. Please stay with us. Welcome back, and thank you for still staying there with us. If you're just joining the program, this is Business Daily coming to you from Trust TV. Of course, I still have my guest with me in the studio, Olabode Showomi, and he has been actually demystifying the whole situation around the ExxonMobil, Seplat, NNPC, NUPRC, a lot of parties in play, especially in this acquisition deal, the benefits to the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. Now, I want to bring you in now to speak about the investment part of this. We know that whatever goes on in the economy of a nation has a broader view. Now, broader view talking about the fact that the international market is watching, especially for the oil market. It's not a market that we have control over the prices. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what's the central message around this whole development to investors, foreign investors now that want to come into Nigeria, and also purpose to looking at local investors?
Well, when you talk about the fundamentals of an economy,
yes,
there are factors of it. Fortunately, rule of law is one of the factors of economic fundamentals. What is important that out of all of this is not that people have differences of opinion or agencies have differences of opinion. What is important is that the right thing is done, the rule of law is obeyed. That is when a proper message is passed. Because if somebody were to use influence to circumvent the process, it doesn't matter whether it is the right result. We do mathematics. There's always this way you can get to the answer, but it is not. So even though you get the answer, if there were 10 marks for that question, the answer is just like 1 mark, because the process is more important than the answer.
Yes.
That's mathematics. So it's the same way. It is not so much that the right result is gotten, but it is more important that the proper process is followed. That way, it sends a message to the investor that there is a proper institution in place. And that is more important than anything else.
I also want to ask you now, what do you see an approval in sight? Let's say in weeks, in months, if a truce is all parties come to a truce for this matter.
If all parties come to a truce today, approval for whatever needs to be done can happen tomorrow. But let us not forget NNPC is in court, and until the court decides, you understand, everybody has to maintain status quo. I think it is also important that certain industries that are new, so we're talking about the power sector, we're talking about the oil and gas sector, we're talking about ICT, needs to have the regulators interact with the judiciary at the top level so that they can be aware of the things, so that their actions does not actually stifle the economy, which is not their intent. I'll give an example. There was a price increase in the power sector. It was in 2015, tariff increase. And a section of the economy, the Manufacturers Association, took the case to court, and immediately they ordered a reversal of it. You understand? And that thing has been an issue since that time. And there are many reasons why it will be an issue, because the judiciary itself, if you are going to go by the legacy that exists there, we have limited understanding of how that industry works. And for them, whenever anybody the court does not take on any matter that has not brought before it, and the court will take on every matter that you bring before it, either to strike it out or to attend to it. So when you bring a case, say you are dissatisfied, and you are saying that you want to maintain status quo, that is justice. But however, were they to know more about the case and the balance of trade that is in there, they may and may not, but more likely may not have given that injunction. So there's a need for them, and it's the same thing with this case. When you bring this before a judge who is not necessarily into all the logistics and who should actually not listen to news on these matters because he's supposed to attend purely on the merit of the case, he may not know the implication of some of the things on the larger economy. So those are where we cannot develop a system independent of the parts of the system. So if you talk about the reproductive system, it starts from the food you eat and all that. You talk about the digestive system, so it's a system. So as long as we are talking about the economic system, we must understand that the judiciary, even though they are silent, even though they should be silent, also needs to be more aware of the implication of some of the judgments that are happening. And that is where it is incumbent on the regulator and those who have oversight to interact with them, have seminars with them, do things with them on a non-combat, at a time when there are no issues, for them to be just aware of the things that are happening, and they will look at landmark cases in other places, so that we don't have people who take advantage of the inefficiencies in the system to get them. But in doing that, it's what will make the system more efficient. And once the people know that whims and caprices will not be answered to by the law, by the judiciary system, they will be forced to obey the law. In the past, it used to be for elections. A day to election, people will just get injunction and say the election should not hold. But that has been studied over time, and justices don't usually give that anymore. However, while it was not that case, people were taking unfair advantage of the imperfections of the system. But it is a system, so we must follow it because we are trying to build institutions. So in trying to build these institutions, the judiciary and those within the justice system need to be made aware of the implications of these things. And that way, once those are done, we have a more efficient system.
I want to also ask you, do you envisage that we're going to see more deals and acquisitions like this come forth? Or maybe how we can also build capacity of those in the local market? Like you just stated as Seplat, although listed on the London Stock Exchange, this is a first of its kind. Now, how do you see this also building the capacity of those in Nigeria?
Well, first of all, it's going to build dreams for others. There's no doubt about that. Seplat used to be one of us playing at the lower rank. Now they are there. So those who are about the same, so they will build dreams. They may get more fields in Nigeria, but they could also get adventurous and go to Angola. They could get adventurous and go to the UAE. Let us not forget that for most of all those OPEC nations, we have a 40 to 50-year OPEC relationship, which we, Nigeria, has not taken advantage of in the economic sense. So were these companies to go and be qualified and bid along with US companies or British companies, they are going to get the same treatment or even better treatment, simply because they will be more trusted as OPEC partners with them. And if they were Nigerian companies, so by the time Nigerian companies start getting acreage in UAE, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia and all that, we're talking in a different dimension. So whichever way you look at it, it's positive development. And we should talk about positives, because you can only build on a positive. You can't build on a negative. You destroy on a negative, even if it appears that you are building. And that is the case of all those who are always spewing negative words, negative language and all that. Ultimately, it never builds. So these are the kind of things that build nations.
So I want to ask you now, I think this is like one of the major developments we have seen come out from the oil and gas sector, especially in the year 2022. And we are half year done into the year. How would you rate how the sector has fared so far?
The sector is undergoing a change. NNPC is now a limited liability company. Even though fully owned by government, there are some things many people don't realize about that. It means that as a company, unlike an agency, they are going to be, by law, producing audited reports. And those audited reports are going to be submitted to the CAC. And a number of other things that will happen. There's going to be a few changes in the structure. Now they are not government agencies like any government. Is there first of all for the benefit of the people. Limited liability companies are there for profit of the shareholders. Even though the shareholders is government, but the ethos, the thinking, the spirit of operation of NNPC now is profit. So those are two differences. So once you are profit oriented, just like people say government has no business in no business in business and all that, and I mean those are obvious. There are dichotomies on that. They are strong on both sides. But the point is that NNPC will now be focused as a for-profit company, and that is the key issue here.
So let's look at first half. First half, your assessment of the sector is the sector has done relatively well. The
sector for a sector undergoing change, yes. I mean, for a deal of that magnitude, I mean, irrespective of the motives behind it, but for a deal of that magnitude to be in the final stages.
I'm actually interested in that motives behind it part that you spoke about.
Well, the truth be told, you can never know people's minds. That's why I said the people, and we cannot speak to people's minds. You understand? We are not called to be mind readers. We are industry people. We are scientists. So, irrespective of whatever is in their mind, we can only speak to what is available on the. So we leave the mind reading to the prophets and the
okay,
and
okay.
those who have that capacity.
Okay, thank you so much, Olabode Shomi. He is an energy sector consultant. He has been with me on the program to speak to issues around the ExxonMobil Seplat acquisition deal. We know that that deal is currently halted, and like he said, everything needs to be done in the confines of the law, which is very important. For a society to thrive, there has to be those around that society need to abide by the law. And the NUPRC, according to body, is well within the confines of the law with what it's doing. And like he also rightly said, like I'm alluding to, if all goes well and fine, this means not yet Uhurudo, but it means the sector is going to a very good level. Don't forget, you can catch up on all the programs on our social media platforms, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. A lot of content there for you to look into on major developments in the world of economy, business, finance, and Nigeria's socio-economic development. Thank you once again, Olabode, for joining me on the program. And that's where I draw the curtain for the program today. My name is Christiana Amodu Otinya. Continue to stay safe.